So, hi everyone. I've had a request to speak to a particular topic, and the topic is, or the question is, could I give some advice for someone finding it hard learning to live a self validated life, and then in brackets, not an externally validated one? It's an interesting question, and I suppose the thing that first occurs to me is to talk about, well, what does it mean a self validated life versus an externally validated one? And as I kind of reflect on it, I think it's all kind of brought up in many ways to think about how we go about our lives in such a way as we gain the approval or validation of others. And, it's kind of reinforced in us from the conditioning we receive at school, which is all about kind of, do this, get a good mark. Don't do that, get a bad mark. And we kind of learn this way of being, which is about achieving the validation of others. But there's a problem with that, which is that oftentimes what we end up doing to get validation externally is often not in alignment with what we in our heart of hearts want. And the other thing is that it's utterly exhausting trying to work out what's going to get us the validation. And that's been my experience in life, is that, when you live for the approval of others, you are constantly sense checking in your mind. Well, is this going to get me the approval, or is it going to be that? And that busyness takes us away from being at peace, right? Because we're constantly having to think about how we show up to make sure that we say the right thing, do the right thing, get it right, don't mess up. And what is interesting to me as I reflect on it is that I don't know that you manage to get that validation all the time anyway, because even if you do what you think is going to get you approval from other people, people aren't always predictable. They won't always give you that validation, even if you do what you think you should have done to get it. So it's good to see, even though you may think you can figure out what to do to get other people's validation, oftentimes it just doesn't work. But even if it does, as I say, it's exhausting. We're constantly having to second guess ourselves. And I think that's what's worth looking at here is, well, why do we need the validation? Well, from what I can see in my experience, I've looked for that validation of knowing I'm worthy and being able to relax and go, yes, I'm a good person. Yes, I can be at peace now. And if you get that validation, maybe you'll get a temporary hit of peace in that moment because you're like, oh, phew, I got it right? Until the next thing that you've then got to worry about, and the next thing after that, or the other person, right? Because there's so many people that we can walk around in our lives seeking their validation. We can actually live in our head 24/7 trying to work out how we're going to get it. So for me, what's been interesting is starting to see, well, we look for that validation as a way of finding peace. And yes, it does appear that we get some peace if we get that validation. But what's going on when that happens? Well, from what I can see, all that happens when we get that peace is we temporarily stop wondering what to do, how to be, what people are going to think, because in that moment, they're not concerned about us. We've done what we needed to do to be the good boy, right? Or the good girl, right? So we relax. And what that means is we drop out of our minds and our thinking, and we drop into our natural state of peace. And for me, that's what I started to see, was that all these times I was looking for validation for other people, I was only looking to be comfortable in my own skin. And yet the only thing that was stopping me from being comfortable in my own skin, or at least a big thing that was stopping me from being comfortable in my own skin, was the idea that I somehow had to figure out what to do to get people's validation. So my thinking, my thought process, the being in my head to to try and get that validation, the act of doing that was actually taking me away from just being at peace. And, one of the things that was one of the places where I really learned this was when Linda and I we had a period before we got married where we broke up. And part of that was because I was worried about the fact that I was not going to have the validation, the approval of my parents. And it got to the stage where I was like, you know what? I just have to be true to myself. And I was really, really scared. I was really scared that I was going to lose the approval of my family. And they, for various reasons, weren't happy about it. But a fascinating thing happened when I just came out and lived what was true for me. Even though people were upset with me and didn't validate my decision, I was at peace. Because I didn't have to consider, what have I got to do to hide who I am from them? I didn't have to think about what step I was going to take to make sure people approved of me. I didn't realize that actually it was very possible to be at peace, even when you don't have people's validation. And the reason for that is the thing that we're doing to try and get the validation, the act of thinking about how we get it, is what takes us away from being at peace. But yet peace is our natural state. So if we're not thinking about what we have to do to get validation, we've self-validated. We're at peace already. So part of the advice that I would give is about seeing that when you are beginning to live what is true for you as opposed to what you think others want from you, there's a lot more peace than you suspect, even if people are upset with you, because you're not having to do very much to try and figure out how to keep their validation. You're not in your head so much. But the other thing that I've seen is that when we really truly live what's true for us, we have a richer life. We have deeper, more meaningful relationships with people because we're not fake. We're being real. We're being authentic. We're not living some mask. We're actually living who we really are. And as a result, people can calibrate for our real energy of who we are. And the people that start coming into our lives tend to be much more aligned with who we are. Now, granted, yes, as you start to drop the masks and as you start to live what's real and true for you, as opposed to what you think others want from you, there are some people that get upset with you and actually don't want anything to do with you. That's happened to me. And what the mind tends to do when that happens is go, you're not going to have anybody that wants to be around you. And it's like the spooky voice that sort of tries to tell you that you're going to be a loner and no one's going to want to know you. That doesn't seem to be true from what I can see. The more I have just begun to honor more of what's true for me, more of who I am, with less of the need for the validation from other people, the more it seems that I have, yes, people have fallen away, but many more people have come into my life who are much better fit for how I actually am, as opposed to how I thought I should be. And those relationships are richer, they're more meaningful. And on a client level, I really saw this is why I would never want to do anything to try and leverage people to work with me or anything like that. No, I just want to be as an authentic expression of myself as I possibly can be, because then people will begin to calibrate automatically to whether I'm a good fit for them or not. And as a result of them calibrating to me being real, I'm much more likely to get a good result with them when they show up in front of me, if they choose to work with me. So it's really tempting to think that the external validation that we get from others is going to lead to a richer, more meaningful existence of life. Actually, it results in a lot of exhaustion, a lot of tiredness, a lot of fakery because we're trying to be something that we're not. We're not in our power. And that, for me, is the key to beginning to be willing to care less And I don't mean careless as just being uncaring. I mean, not be so bothered about what others think about us, because ultimately it doesn't mean anything about us. And it's much easier and better for us. We seem to show up more powerfully, from what I can see, when we just don't come from a mask and we just live what's true. And the more you can start to see that for yourself, certainly been my journey, the more I recognize, yeah, you know what? Of course, there's friction, and of course, people disagree, but at least I'm true. At least people know where they stand. At least I'm not having to hide and be exhausted trying to be something that I'm not. That matters to me. And so I hope that gives you something to chew on if you've been sort of reflecting on the same question, let's say. Hope this is helpful. Sending lots of love. Take care.